I'd like to invite all the presenters then to come and take their places on the platform for a few questions. And while they're taking their seats, could we have the first questioner? And I'd just remind you that the UK Biobank is endlessly interested in your views as to what sorts of things should be done to enhance the resource, so please don't be shy. Question over here.
Hello, I appreciated your heroic attempts to get data out of the GPs, but I wondered if you thought what consequence such an approach will have to every other research study who will not be able to get data out of GPs as a result of your having gone in with an opt-in process. So I represent, sort of, the other birth cohorts in the country, the NHR Bioresource, which have a similar number between them as the UK Biobank. NHS Digital would be much nicer, let's put it that way.
So there is progress being made in terms of putting in place a national extract for primary care. I think there have been several attempts at this previously. None of them have necessarily come into being. I think the work that we've been seeing, and again, Alex Markham has been doing heroic efforts as part of the Oscar sub-team to try and bring the right thinking in place. So I think more than ever, there is a likelihood that some national extract will be in place at some point in the future. I think Biobank would be very supportive of that and would look to intersect with it at the appropriate point. But certainly for now and for the short term, we need to go down this approach.
Thank you. Other questions? Gentleman over there.
I had a question about medication data in the biobank. So currently, the self-reported medications are extremely hard to deal with because there's no standardization with them. I know you're planning on adding prescription information. Is that going to be standardized to RxNorm or some other sort of standard when you actually get it into the showcase?
Yeah, so as Mark described, the data that we receive, which comes from a variety of different sources, is the prescriptions are, some of them are read-coded, some of them are BNF-coded, and some of them are coded to DM and D. In the future, when we have coverage of the whole cohort, or nearly the whole cohort, and it's clearer which coding system for prescription should be the dominant one, we will map them all to a common coding system. In all likelihood, we'll do exactly the same with the self-report medications from the baseline, try and map them over in rather the same way we have done with diagnoses using available tools to facilitate that mapping. We're not going to do that right at this moment, not because we don't want to, but because for two reasons. One, we don't know yet what the dominant coding system will be and what the best map would be. It would probably be DM and D, but we would reserve judgment on that for now. And the second reason is we know that out there are large numbers of research groups who are really keen to start working with the primary care data, and we don't want to hold it up. We just want to get it out there as soon as we can. So we will in due course, yeah.
There's a question down here.
Hi, I actually have a question for Josh. Could you explain to me a little bit more about the Phenotype Risk score? So from what I understand, you're calculating a score for a disease based on other phenotypes, but how do you know if the disease is occurring first and then leading to the other phenotypes? So could you talk a little bit more about the reverse causality issue?
So interesting in this case, we're actually looking at Mendelian diseases. So in some cases, the disease is actually occurring first from the setting of the genetic variant being there and causing the other phenotype. So in this case, let's take cystic fibrosis example and work through that a little bit more, like bronchiectasis, asthma, pancreatitis, meconium ileus. All those features would each get a weight, and that weight is aggregated to produce a score. In general, we aren't necessarily interested in whether it occurs before or after, given it's a Mendelian disease, although we have actually in some cases looked to see whether we find the disease by a risk score before it's clinically diagnosed. For instance, there was a New England Journal CPC case recently where they talked about an older woman who was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and we calculated the phenotype risk score for that individual and found that she would be at the 98th percentile. We have found that certain other mutations we can find before it's clinically diagnosed, like JAK2 for polycythemia vera, for instance. But in general, it's more to find it and then potentially give a readout for the pathogenicity of variants as a condition, or you could think about like hemochromatosis and things like that as a good example. Although we find at our institution, people actually diagnose hemochromatosis pretty well.
Thank you. We are about out of time, so could I ask you to, again, show your appreciation for the speakers in this session?